Hey. I'm Bone T, and I just dug up another golden age but weird.
Tawky Tawny, Tiger Triumphs. Let's take a leap back into the golden age of comics, when superheroes soared over city skylines and magic words could turn a boy into the world's mightiest mortal. Amid all the capes and cosmic threats, Captain Marvel Comics, published by Fawcett Comics, introduced one of the strangest, most endearing characters in comic book history, Mr. Tawky Tawny. Making his debut in Captain Marvel Adventures number 79 in 1947, Tawky Tawny wasn't just any sidekick or comic relief, he was a fully anthropomorphic tiger, polite and erudite, who wore dapper suits and longed to be accepted by human society. While the concept of talking animals wasn't new in children's literature, Tawky Tawny's earnest attempt to assimilate into a world of humans was both hilarious and oddly touching. The origin of Mr. Tawky Tawny is as whimsical as his name. Originally an ordinary Bengal tiger living in India, Tawky gained the ability to speak after encountering a hermit with a magical serum. Yearning for companionship and tired of jungle solitude, he journeyed to civilization, only to discover that most people were terrified of a tiger in a three-piece suit. Despite this, Tawky's gentle demeanor and impeccable manners eventually won over Captain Marvel and his friends. He became a recurring character, often providing comic relief but also serving as a symbol of acceptance and the belief that anyone, not only humans, could strive to better themselves. Tawky Tawny's presence in the Captain Marvel series was a breath of fresh air during an era when comics often repeated the same superhero tropes. Fans, particularly younger readers, adored his blend of slapstick misadventures and genuine pathos. He was often depicted trying to secure mundane jobs or apartments, only to be rebuffed because of his stripes and tail, echoing real-world issues of prejudice in a light-hearted way. Over time, Tawky became a beloved fixture in Captain Marvel's supporting cast, even joining the Marvel family on wild adventures, battling everything from mad scientists to interdimensional threats, always in his signature suit and tie. Unlike many oddball characters of the Golden Age who faded into obscurity, Mr. Tawky Tawny has endured, appearing in various forms through DC Comics' later revivals of the Shazam mythos. His legacy is a testament to the creativity and risk-taking spirit of early comics, showing that even the weirdest ideas could find a devoted audience. So the next time you see a tiger in a suit, remember Mr. Tawky Tawny, the talking tiger who just wanted to fit in. Brought to you by Victory Age Comics. Reviving forgotten heroes, one panel at a time. Quirky hero reimagined. In the wild and experimental era known as the Golden Age of Comics, publishers were always in search of fresh, attention-grabbing ideas. One of the most unusual superheroes to emerge from this period was the Vagabond, a quirky crime fighter who appeared in Marvel Mystery Comics number 49, published in 1943 by Timely Comics, which would later become Marvel. Unlike the Caped Titans or scientific geniuses of his time, the Vagabond's alter ego was Pat Murphy, a regular guy who donned a shabby, patched-up suit, a battered old hat, and a fake red nose. His whole act was based on looking like a harmless, bumbling vagrant, but beneath that comical exterior, he was a master sleuth with a penchant for slapstick justice. The Vagabond's adventures were anything but ordinary. In his debut and only solo story, he stumbles onto a gang of criminals plotting a robbery while he's pretending to sleep in an alleyway. Using a combination of quick wits, physical comedy, and his ability to be underestimated, the Vagabond turns the tables on the crooks. He sets off a series of comedic mishaps that end with the bad guys tripping over each other, slipping on banana peels, and being outsmarted by what they perceive as a harmless tramp. The narrative is peppered with humorous dialogue and visual gags, setting the Vagabond apart from the more serious, square-jawed heroes of the day. What makes the Vagabond truly fascinating is how he subverted the superhero formula at a time when the genre was still finding its footing. Most heroes of the Golden Age relied on superhuman strength, flashy costumes, or high-tech gadgets to fight evil. The Vagabond, in contrast, embraced the role of society's outcast and used people's prejudices against them. His disguise, which made him invisible to criminals and police alike, became his greatest weapon. This approach not only injected much-needed humor into the medium but also subtly critiqued the rigid social hierarchies of the time, suggesting that courage and cleverness could be found in the most unlikely places. Although the Vagabond never became a household name and faded after just one appearance, his short-lived career is a testament to the creative risks taken during the Golden Age. His blend of slapstick, social commentary, and anti-hero attitude paved the way for later, more nuanced characters who didn't fit the typical superhero mold. The Vagabond remains a curious footnote in comic book history, one that reminds us how even the most forgotten heroes once challenged the boundaries of the genre. Brought to you by Victory Age Comics. Reviving forgotten heroes, one panel at a time. Bees, heroes, and stripes. Let's take a journey back to the Golden Age of Comics, a time when superheroes could be as wild and wonderfully weird as the imaginations that spawned them. Among the countless caped crusaders and masked vigilantes who leapt from the newsprint during the 1940s, few stood out for their sheer strangeness quite like the Red Bee. Created in 1940 by writer Tony Bloom and artist Charles Nicholas for Quality Comics, the Red Bee was actually Assistant District Attorney Rick Raleigh by day. But at night, Raleigh donned a bright yellow and red striped costume, complete with puffy sleeves and a mask, and hit the docks of Superior City to fight crime in a most unusual way, accompanied by a swarm of trained bees, including his favorite, Michael. Now, most superheroes of the era wielded gadgets, fists, or magical powers, but the Red Bee's secret weapon was, incredibly, his partnership with actual bees. The most famous of his insect allies was Michael, a bee that lived in a hollow compartment inside Raleigh's belt buckle. Whenever evildoers, particularly Nazi spies and saboteurs, a common enemy during World War II, reared their heads, the Red Bee would unleash Michael to sting, distract, or even carry out daring acts of sabotage. In one memorable adventure, Michael squeezed into the barrel of a villain's gun, rendering it useless just in time for the Red Bee to leap into action. The sight of a grown man in striped tights commanding an army of bees might seem odd today, but in the anything-goes world of 1940s comics, it was just another day for an American hero. The Red Bee's adventures were filled with all the melodrama, patriotism, and outlandish plots you'd expect from wartime comics, but what really set him apart was the earnestness with which his creators approached his powers. Stories often treated the Bee's contributions with a straight face, and even gave Michael moments of near-heroic sacrifice. This approach exemplified the Golden Age's willingness to embrace the bizarre and the experimental, a time before superheroes were standardized, when originality and imagination reigned supreme. Though the Red Bee never achieved the fame of Batman or Superman, his stories serve as a fascinating snapshot of a period when comics were still finding their voice, and when no idea was too outlandish to try. Today, the Red Bee is mostly remembered as a quirky footnote in comic book history, a symbol of the boundless creativity, and occasional absurdity, of the Golden Age. Yet, in his own way, the Red Bee represents the spirit of those early comics, bold, unafraid to be different, and always fighting for justice, no matter how unconventional the means. So the next time you see a superhero wielding a strange power, remember the Red Bee and his loyal companion Michael, the bee who saved the day from a belt buckle. Brought to you by Victory Age Comics. Reviving forgotten heroes, one panel at a time. Molten Steel, Superhero Origin. The Golden Age of Comics, spanning from the late 1930s through the early 1950s, was a time when imagination knew no bounds and the rules of storytelling were still being written. During this era, publishers competed to create the most memorable and outlandish superheroes, often drawing inspiration from the wildest corners of science, mythology, and pure fantasy. One particularly unusual and daring example comes from 1943, in MLJ Comics' Zip Comics, with the debut of Steel Sterling. Unlike other heroes who were bitten by radioactive spiders or donned mystical rings, Steel Sterling was born from a truly bizarre, and dangerous, origin story that both captivated and shocked young readers of the day. Steel Sterling's alter ego was John Sterling, a chemist who sought to avenge his father's murder. Driven by both grief and a desire for justice, Sterling concocted a serum to make himself impervious to harm, but he wasn't content to simply drink it or apply it to his skin. Instead, in a scene equal parts horrifying and heroic, he dove headfirst into a vat of molten steel after applying the serum. Miraculously, rather than being incinerated, his body fused with the metal, granting him superhuman strength, invulnerability, and even the ability to leap great distances. The visual of a man emerging unscathed from liquid metal was unprecedented, providing a spectacle that set Steel Sterling apart from his contemporaries. For young readers in the 1940s, this origin had a dual appeal. It was both terrifying and awe-inspiring. At a time when science and industry were rapidly transforming the world, the idea that a person could harness the power of steel itself tapped into contemporary fascinations with progress, technology, and the indomitable human spirit. The comics didn't shy away from the grotesque elements of Sterling's transformation. In fact, they highlighted them, making the character's leap into molten steel a rite of passage that mirrored the era's fascination with heroic sacrifice. This willingness to blend danger with heroism was characteristic of the Golden Age ethos, where comics often walked the line between the fantastic and the macabre. Steel Sterling's story is a testament to the experimental spirit of early comics, a reminder of how creators pushed boundaries to capture the imagination of their young audience. While his origin might seem extreme by modern standards, it reflects a time when comic book heroes were forged, quite literally, in the crucible of creativity and risk-taking. As we revisit these forgotten tales, we gain a deeper appreciation for the weird and wonderful history of the medium. Brought to you by Victory Age Comics. Reviving forgotten heroes, one panel at a time. Hidden queer superhero revealed. In the vast and colorful tapestry of comic book history, the Golden Age, roughly 1938 to 1956, was filled with larger-than-life heroes, wild experimentation, and sometimes, stories that were well ahead of their time. Among the capes and cowls of the early 1940s, one hero stands out not just for his mystical powers, but for his unique coding and representation, the Green Lama. Debuting in 1940, the Green Lama, aka Jethro Dumont, was a wealthy American who studied Tibetan Buddhism and returned to fight crime in New York. Unlike the more brash and brawny superheroes of his era, the Green Lama was a serene, soft-spoken Buddhist monk, wielding magical powers and an unwavering commitment to non-violence, a radical departure from the typical rough-and-tumble vigilantes of the time. But what truly makes the Green Lama a fascinating, weird, and unusual figure in comic book lore is his status as perhaps the first ever gay-coded superhero. While the term gay-coded refers to the use of subtext and characteristics to suggest queerness without direct acknowledgement, thanks to restrictive social norms of the era, the Green Lama's stories are awash with subtle nods and winks. He was often depicted as a single man with close male companions, most notably Gary Brown, his loyal assistant. Their partnership, marked by deep camaraderie and emotional intimacy, was unusual in a genre that otherwise paired heroes with damsels in distress or overtly masculine sidekicks. The Green Lama's gentle demeanor, elegant dress, and avoidance of traditional heterosexual romance set him apart in ways that queer readers of the time may have recognized, even if mainstream audiences did not. The Green Lama's unique blend of Eastern mysticism and coded queerness came during a period when American pop culture was otherwise dominated by hypermasculine, heteronormative protagonists. His adventures were a mix of occult detective work, philosophical musings, and magical battles, infused with Buddhist teachings and a pacifist worldview. In a landscape filled with Superman's brute force and Batman's brooding machismo, the Green Lama offered readers a hero who solved conflicts with wisdom and compassion. This was decades before any sort of mainstream LGBTQ representation in comics, making the Green Lama's stories not only weird and unusual, but quietly revolutionary. Although his time in the spotlight was brief, the Green Lama's legacy is a fascinating chapter in the hidden history of queer-coded heroes and the incredible diversity lurking beneath the surface of Golden Age comics. He stands as a testament to the subtle ways marginalized identities found expression, even under the constraints of their times. So next time you flip through an old comic, remember that sometimes, the most unusual and groundbreaking stories are the ones hidden in plain sight. Brought to you by Victory Age Comics. Reviving forgotten heroes, one panel at a time. Horrifying Comics Unleashed. In the golden age of horror comics, EC Comics was infamous for pushing the boundaries of what could be depicted on the page. One particularly unsettling moment came in the 1950s with The Haunt of Fear, a title known for its grisly tales and shocking visuals. In one story, a murderer finds himself haunted by the severed head of his victim, whose lips eerily move to deliver one final, chilling accusation. What truly set this story apart wasn't just its narrative, but the disturbing realism of the artwork. The artist, Graham Ingalls, later revealed in interviews that he used actual morgue photographs as reference when illustrating the severed head. This commitment to authenticity lent the comic a level of grotesque detail rarely seen in the medium at the time, leaving readers both fascinated and horrified. The use of real-life imagery in horror comics was highly controversial, especially during a period when the medium was under intense scrutiny for its supposed corrupting influence on youth. EC Comics' decision to embrace such graphic content contributed to the outcry that led to the creation of the Comics Code Authority, which would drastically limit horror comics storytelling possibilities for decades. Yet, it's moments like this that have cemented EC's legacy as a pioneer of horror comics, willing to cross lines others wouldn't dare. Brought to you by Victory Age Comics. Reviving forgotten heroes, one panel at a time. Comic book controversy uncovered. In the early 1950s, America was gripped by a fear that comic books were warping young minds. One of the most notorious examples came from the pages of EC Comics' Crime Suspense Stories No. 22, published in 1954. The cover illustration, by Johnny Craig, depicted a man holding a bloody axe in one hand and the severed head of a woman in the other. The image was so shocking that it quickly became the centerpiece of a national debate. The controversy reached its peak during the Senate subcommittee hearings on juvenile delinquency. Senators, parents, and psychologists argued that such graphic imagery could inspire violence and delinquent behavior in children. The infamous cover from Crime Suspense Stories was introduced as evidence, held up in the hearings as an example of how far comic books had allegedly gone in corrupting youth. During the testimony, EC Comics publisher Bill Gaines defended the cover, arguing that it was in good taste for the cover of a horror comic. His statement, however, only fueled the outrage. The image, and the reaction to it, played a crucial role in the creation of the Comics Code Authority, a self-censorship body that would sanitize comic books for decades to come. This bizarre chapter in comic book history shows how a single shocking panel could help reshape an entire industry, forever changing what stories could be told. Brought to you by Victory Age Comics. Reviving forgotten heroes, one panel at a time. Censored horror comic controversy. In the early 1950s, American comic books were exploding in popularity, with the so-called Golden Age ushering in a wave of creativity across superhero, crime, and especially horror genres. Among the myriad horror comics vying for attention, Harvey Comics' Chamber of Chills stood out with its lurid, often shocking covers. Issue number 19, published in 1953, would become infamous for its cover illustration, a ghastly, melting green face, eyes bulging in terror, as skeletal hands reach for a glass of liquid. The image, drawn by the talented artist Warren Kramer, was designed to entice readers with a promise of spine-chilling tales inside. But this grotesque vision did more than just sell magazines, it ignited a national debate about the influence of comic books on young readers. This period saw a growing concern among parents, teachers, and politicians that horror comics were corrupting the youth. Publications like Chamber of Chills were singled out during Senate hearings on juvenile delinquency, and their covers were brandished as evidence of the medium's supposed depravity. The melting face of issue number 19 became a symbol of everything critics feared about comics. Not only did it shock with its graphic content, but it also seemed to revel in taboo and the macabre. The controversy surrounding this and similar images helped fuel the fire that led to the infamous book Seduction of the Innocent by psychiatrist Frederick Wertham, which claimed that comics were a direct cause of juvenile crime. The backlash was swift and devastating for the comic book industry. Publishers, fearing government regulation and public outrage, banded together to form the Comics Code Authority in 1954. This self-regulatory body imposed strict guidelines that effectively neutered horror comics, banning words like terror and horror from titles, prohibiting the depiction of monsters, excessive violence, and, of course, any images resembling the melting face from Chamber of Chills number 19. The vibrant, sometimes shocking horror comics of the Golden Age were forced underground or out of business entirely, and an era of creative censorship began. The once bold covers of the horror genre were replaced with bland, sanitized stories that lacked the original bite and terror. The story of Chamber of Chills number 19 is a haunting reminder of how a single image can change an entire industry. Its grotesque cover not only captured the imagination of a generation but also became the rallying point for those who sought to silence the darker side of comics. Today, collectors and historians look back on this issue as a symbol of the Golden Age's wild creativity and the ensuing battle for artistic freedom. Brought to you by Victory Age Comics. Reviving forgotten heroes, one panel at a time. Forgotten horror comic classic. In the eerie autumn of 1943, when the world was already shrouded in the darkness of war, American comic book readers encountered a chilling tale that would make even the most hardened pulp fan shudder. Blue Bolt Weird Tales was a special issue spun off from the ongoing Blue Bolt series, and within its garish, lurid pages lay a story that pushed the boundaries of what comics dared to depict. The tale centered on a deranged scientist, operating under the ominous glow of a full moon, who sought to conquer death by stitching together corpses scavenged from local graveyards. The story's gothic atmosphere, with storm-lashed castles and shadowy laboratories, felt like something torn from the nightmares of Mary Shelley herself, yet it predated the more famous Frankenstein comics by several years. Unlike the sanitized horror of later decades, this story's artwork reveled in grotesque detail, the patchwork flesh, the wild-eyed mania of the scientist, the helpless terror of his victims. Readers had never seen such macabre imagery in a comic book, and many were both captivated and horrified. The panels dripped with atmosphere, employing heavy shadows and lurid color palettes to evoke a sense of dread. Contemporary letters to editors reveal that some parents and even newsstand owners were alarmed by the story's gruesomeness, with some calling for the magazine to be pulled from shelves. The controversy foreshadowed the later public outcry against horror comics, making Blue Bolt Weird Tales a true pioneer in testing the limits of the medium. This story didn't just shock for the sake of shock, it helped set the template for Golden Age horror comics that would explode in popularity in the late 1940s and early 1950s. It inspired a generation of writers and artists to explore the darker corners of human imagination, paving the way for titles like Tales from the Crypt and the Vault of Horror. Yet, because it emerged so early in the genre, it remains largely forgotten today, overshadowed by the very monsters it inspired. For a brief moment, though, under the light of a fictional full moon, Blue Bolt Weird Tales dared to ask, what if comic books could be truly terrifying? Today, collectors and historians look back at this story as a turning point, a rare and bold experiment in the Golden Age of comics. It serves as a reminder that comics have always had the power to provoke, to unsettle, and to break new ground, even when the world wasn't quite ready. As Halloween approaches, and the shadows grow long, it's worth revisiting these forgotten tales that once kept readers up at night. Brought to you by Victory Age Comics. Reviving forgotten heroes, one panel at a time. Vitamin-powered superhero origin. The Golden Age of comics, spanning from 1938 to 1956, was a time of wild experimentation and oddball origin stories, but few are as fascinating as the original tale of the Blue Beetle. Before he donned the iconic DC mantle, the Blue Beetle was Dan Garrett, a rookie patrolman in the city's crime-ridden streets, first appearing in Fox Feature Syndicate's Mystery Man Comics #1 in 1939. Unlike the later versions, this early Blue Beetle didn't have mystical scarabs or alien tech. Instead, his powers came from something perhaps even stranger, a mysterious substance called vitamin 2X. Developed by a kindly pharmacist named Dr. Franz, who was both Garrett's mentor and confidant, this vitamin granted Dan enhanced strength, speed, and stamina, essentially turning him into a superpowered crime fighter overnight. Dan Garrett's transformation was emblematic of the year's quirky approach to superhero genesis. Vitamin 2X, a blue pill whose origins were never fully explained, was meant to be a secret weapon in the battle against crime and corruption, a reflection of the year's faith in scientific wonders. Unlike Superman's alien birth or Batman's tragic vow, Blue Beetle's powers came from a daily dose of pharmaceutical magic, with Dan sometimes popping pills mid-battle to overcome overwhelming odds. His costume, a simple blue suit with a beetle emblem, was originally just bulletproof fabric, another product of Dr. Franz's ingenuity. There was no high-tech gadgetry or supernatural artifact. In fact, the stories often leaned into the almost comical idea of a superhero powered by vitamins, decades before health fads became mainstream. The Blue Beetle's adventures were just as bizarre and unpredictable as his origin. He fought an array of strange villains, from mad scientists to crooks with peculiar gimmicks, and even dabbled in supernatural storylines as the years went on. Sometimes, the comic would swing from gritty crime drama to outright science fiction, with Dan Garrett facing off against robots, zombies, and even Nazi saboteurs as World War II raged. Throughout it all, his reliance on vitamin 2X was a running theme, with the writers playing fast and loose with what the blue pill could do, sometimes granting him superhuman feats, other times simply helping him recover from wounds or resist poisons. This inconsistency only added to the character's charm and the wild unpredictability of Golden Age storytelling. Though Blue Beetle would eventually be reinvented, first by Charlton Comics and later by DC, with Ted Kord and Jamie Reyes taking up the mantle, the oddball origins of Dan Garrett and his miraculous vitamin remain a testament to the creative chaos of early comics. The character's journey from humble beat cop to costumed crusader on a vitamin-fueled rampage stands as one of the weirdest, most endearing stories from the Golden Age. Today, it reminds us that the world of comics has always thrived on strange ideas and bold experimentation, no matter how bizarre they might seem in hindsight. Brought to you by Victory Age Comics. Reviving forgotten heroes, one panel at a time. Haunted Comics controversy unveiled. In the eerie autumn of 1944, just as Halloween was casting its long shadow, the comic book Adventures into Darkness #8 hit the newsstands, igniting whispers among both readers and parents. This Golden Age horror comic, published by Standard Comics, featured a story titled The House That Death Built, which revolved around a decrepit mansion that lured in wayward souls, only for the house itself to be revealed as a living, malevolent entity that feasted on the fear and flesh of its inhabitants. The story's chilling illustrations, complete with grotesque, leering faces in the woodwork and shadowy tendrils creeping from the floorboards, pushed the boundaries of what was considered appropriate for young readers of the time. Such tales were often met with outrage, as parents and community leaders feared for the moral well-being of children, leading to the beginnings of the anti-comics crusades that would later culminate in the creation of the Comics Code Authority. The impact of Adventures into Darkness was immediate and widespread. Local newspapers ran editorials denouncing the comic's macabre themes, and several PTA meetings cited the issue as an example of the dangerous content flooding American homes. What made this tale particularly unusual was its meta-narrative. The house in the story was said to be haunted by the ghosts of previous comic book characters, doomed to forever relive their final, grisly moments. This chilling twist not only broke the fourth wall, but also established a shared universe of horror within the publisher's titles, a concept that was groundbreaking in the early 1940s. The story's combination of supernatural horror, psychological unease, and self-referential storytelling made it a standout, and a target, among the year's horror comics. The controversy surrounding this comic contributed to the formation of a wave of censorship and self-regulation in the industry. Adventures into Darkness and similar titles would soon find themselves at the center of Senate hearings and public burnings, leading to the infamous Comics Code, which effectively neutered horror comics for decades. However, the legacy of The House That Death Built persisted, influencing artists and writers who would later return to horror comics in the 1970s, inspired by the taboo-breaking boldness of their Golden Age predecessors. Collectors today consider this issue a rare gem, not only for its lurid artwork and boundary-pushing storytelling but also for its role in shaping the history of comic book censorship. In retrospect, the legacy of Golden Age horror comics like Adventures into Darkness #8 lies in their willingness to explore the darkest corners of the imagination, even in the face of public outcry. These stories laid the groundwork for the mature storytelling that would define later eras of comics, serving as a reminder of how art and controversy often walk hand in hand. The haunted house that devoured its residents in 1944 continues to echo through comic book history, a testament to the power, and peril, of pushing creative limits. Brought to you by Victory Age Comics. Reviving forgotten heroes, one panel at a time.